This is Our News, the weekend edition, and on the broadcast tonight. At odds again, the head of the teachers union disagrees with the education minister's stance on corporal punishment, suggesting government should take the lead on the matter. Plus, 1 year after an increase in value-added tax, has the public adjusted to the tax hike? And the road ahead to the next general election, what one opposition member of parliament believes her party needs to do to secure a victory at the polls.
Our News is brought to you by Alive.
Good evening, I'm Andrew Knowles, and thanks so much for joining us. Topping news, Bahamas Union of Teachers President Belinda Wilson is disagreeing with Education Minister Jeffrey Lloyd, who this past week said government should not be the sole decider on the controversial issue of corporal punishment. She told Our News government must first take the step with drafting legislation and then bring it to the people. She spoke with our Kyle Joaquin.
As the touchy topic of corporal punishment is thrust back into the spotlight, Bahamas Union of Teachers President Belinda Wilson says the government must lead the way on where the country goes with it, despite Education Minister Jeffrey Lloyd's assertion that there needs to be public discussion on it.
It's good to have public discussion. It's good to have stakeholders discussing a matter like this because it's very important. However, as the minister and a policy maker, I think that it's at least a draft policy should come from the ministry or a white paper or a green paper.
In Parliament last week, Lloyd said it makes no sense for government to seek to make changes to the law when parents are still beating their children at home. He called it a cultural phenomenon. Wilson said while it's good to talk about what needs to be done, the government has work to do.
There has to be some guidelines that drive the discussion, and that must come from the Ministry of Education. That's my view.
Currently, it is legal for corporal punishment to be administered in schools, but only by an administrator and in the presence of another administrator. Recently, a private school administrator became the center of attention after a student's parents alleged that he beat their child to the point of bruising. When it comes to the issue of beating in schools, Wilson said the teachers union has yet to make a decision.
But let me say that the Bahamas Union of Teachers at this time, we have not coined a policy. But I believe that corporal punishment has its place. But there's a difference between corporal punishment, a spanking, and abuse.
Wilson says if it comes to the point where corporal punishment is taken out of schools, government must suggest an alternate method of discipline.
So if education is going to say, all right, we're going to take corporal punishment out of the school totally, then they have to be able to tell us what are the strategies, what are the alternative measures that we're going to use for discipline and punishment for our students.
For Our News, I'm Kyle Joaquin.
Meantime, officers of the Fire Services Department were called to the Anatole Rogers High School this morning. This after one of the buildings was reportedly set on fire. When firefighters arrived at the school shortly after 8 a.m., they met the woodwork room on fire. Now the building sustained extensive damage, and police say the culprits also attempted to set fire to the tuck shop. However, no other buildings were damaged. As officers continue their investigations, they say arson is suspected in this incident. Anyone with any information in connection with this case is asked to contact Crime Stoppers at 328-TIPS, 919 or 911, or the nearest police station. Well, more than a year after Minister of Finance Peter Turnquest announced that value-added tax would increase from 7.5% to 12%, many Bahamians say they are still struggling to cope with the additional burden. Our Jared Higgs also tells us a former MP who voted against the implementation of that is sticking by his original position.
Taxation in a country has to be equitable. The taxation system has to share the burden proportionately.
Former Member of Parliament for Marco City, Greg Moss, didn't make many friends within his own party when he voted against the implementation of value-added tax back in 2014. He was joined by 7 members of the FNM opposition, including current Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis and Deputy Prime Minister Peter Turnquest. Fast forward 4 years, however, and Minnis and Turnquest found themselves on the other side of the fence. A 60% value-added tax increase brought the rate to 12%, a process that was complete 30 days after its initial announcement. Moss says that decision shows that the burden is still on the poor.
What we are doing is building this country on the back of the people least able to afford to do so and giving a free pass to everyone else. When you think about last year's budget, for instance, exemption on helicopters and caviar and champagne, all of this nonsense, and you come back to this year's budget, and yes, you didn't increase the VAT to beyond 12%, but two things in that. One, the statement is it's not being increased beyond 12% in this budget. That's a subtle indication that there's no commitment to not increasing it beyond 12% going forward. And I believe we will see it being increased.
Our News also asked members of the public how the VAT increase has impacted them nearly a year on.
As somebody who is a single mother of a 3-year-old, it is difficult because the money that you would allocate for savings, you now have to take that to pay extra on something that you would obviously need, such as things for the child, school fee, things like that. So it is difficult, and I don't know what the plans are. Maybe they're going to decrease it, or if this money, if I knew if the money was going towards something that will benefit me or my son later on in life, then I would feel a little bit better about the increase. But at this point, it's difficult, and it's not getting any better, and it's very daunting.
It affect me bad, real bad. I gotta pay. I getting $280 a month, and I gotta pay $220 for rent every month. Leave me with what? Zero. I got a food stamp. My food card was lost from Christmas, and I haven't got one yet.
Right now, all the things go in the economy and everything, you know. A lot of people are really having a hard time, and I feel like we could have been given like a more longer time to get used to the idea of the increase.
But not everybody criticized the VAT hike.
Based on what the government has said, they say that they have not collected what they ought to have collected. But based on the economic position of the country, you can see the country is operating in a more organized form. You can see, well, let me put it to you like this. I can't hear anything about this minister messing with the funds. There's no record of any minister. Everything has been spent appropriately, and they have records of it. In the other administration, you can't find this. They want this document. They can't find it. This document is lost. And so what they're doing now, I approve of it because at least I can see what they're doing, and the country is being operated in a responsible, dignified way.
Deputy Prime Minister Peter Turnquest has said there will be no new tax categories or a VAT increase this budget cycle. Reporting for Our News Weekend, I am Jared Higgs.
Well, Progressive Liberal Party Member of Parliament Glenys Hannah Martin is insisting that the party will have to overcome the Free National Movement's false narrative if it has any hopes of winning the next general election.
I think one of the biggest problems the PLP faces or has faced is the narrative that was put on the PLP by the Free National Movement once in opposition, stealing the VAT money, 20 million gone, 200 million gone missing, all of these things, all of which prove not to be true. But I think that having said them, and particularly in the lead up to the election, and I believe influenced the election, is still sort of rooted in the psyche of people, even though they're not true.
The Free National Movement celebrated its historic 2017 landslide victory at the polls, leaving the PLP with a meager 4 seats in Parliament. Since their win, the Free National Movement has accused the former PLP administration of mismanaging the country. Hannah Martin says the PLP has to push back on the damaging rhetoric.
We have to, we have to do all that we can to ensure that the truth is known about the time that we served, that it was a period of hard work, high production, many achievements, BAMC, the airspace, the modernization of the road traffic department, the network of Dopplers, and on and on. I mean, the list is so long. So the University of the Bahamas, so many things happened. We worked very hard, but we had a very mischievous and agitated opposition that was prepared to say and do anything and to feed into fears.
Hannah Martin is not the only sitting PLP MP to weigh in on what the party needs to do in order to secure an election win. PLP Deputy Leader Chester Cooper has stressed the need for the party's 2022 general election candidates to be good and credible people Cooper also stressed the need for more female candidates. Meantime, Deputy Speaker of the House of Assembly, Don Saunders, is throwing his support behind House Speaker Arson, who recently insisted he would risk it all to ensure his office remains independent. Saunders says when it comes to the independence of the chair, he and the House Speaker are on the same page. Our Jasmine Brown has that story.
The Speaker has to be impartial, has to be independent. The key responsibility of the Speaker is to be impartial and to be independent. And the key responsibility of the Speaker is also to make sure protect the backbench and the opposition, because the government will always have the numbers.
Saunders' comments came days after House Speaker Arson had strong words for some members of the opposition. On Wednesday, he told Exuma and Ragged Islands MP Chester Cooper and Cat Island, Rumpke and San Salvador MP Philip Brave Davis that he will not tolerate disrespect from members of Parliament after Cooper attempted to greet students from his constituency during their visit to Parliament. Before the House Speaker could respond, Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis told Cooper no, and that he should speak with the students outside the visitors' gallery. This prompted comments by Davis, Cooper, and Pine Ridge MP Frederick McAlpine, who questioned whether Minnis was handing down instructions to the Speaker. And that prompted Moutry to insist the chair was independent and that he was not being influenced by anyone.
We understand our constitutional responsibilities and our constitutional duties. So the most important thing I think we should focus on is making sure that the members have the respect for Parliament enough, the respect for the nation enough to know that they should elect and expect from the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker someone who would be impartial and someone who would be able to really truly represent the Parliament and the rules and regulations of Parliament on both sides equally. I think the Speaker and I, we've been able to demonstrate that. This is not an easy job.
When asked about the climate in the House, Saunders insisted it's not always easy keeping the peace.
This is not an easy job, being in the chair and trying to manage the egos and the expectations of your colleagues, but we understand our responsibility. So when people look at what we do, and sometimes they criticize, and we take that criticism we don't look at it in a negative way, but we are a new, fresh team. Both Speaker and I, this is our first term in Parliament, and I think thus far we have demonstrated a sense of responsibility to our duties to Parliament.
Reporting for our News, I'm Jasmine Brown.
Still ahead tonight, the hotel union says it supports an increase in parental leave time. That story and more when our News, the Weekend Edition, returns.